Well, hi everyone. I know it's been a long time since we've had a chance to come and visit you, but this is the very last chapter of BB&B. It's been 2 years. You've been able to see Betty grow up, haven't you? Look at her now. Can you believe it? You've had a chance to see her grow up right before your eyes. And we have been having a wonderful time completing this book. And we are going to do the final chapter today, and then we're going to thank all of you, and then we're going to ask you to pray as we get ready to publish the book, which, as you know, is going to be about all the wonderful action heroes that we've discovered in the Apocrypha. Well, we're going to conclude with battles. So, Betty, by now, it must look like all the people ever did was to get into fights with people. What's really strange is if you look at a map and see the size of Israel, or as we say, the Holy Land, you'll see that it's about the same size as the state of Connecticut. You'll also see that there is more land around Israel, and you'll also see how far away Rome is from Jerusalem. So why were people always trying to take over this small property? Well, Betty, that's a good question. There's lots of reasons, and that's because the area is so beautiful, for one thing. And another is that the people of Israel were God's chosen people. And sometimes armies thought that if they could defeat the Israelites, that they would be defeating God. And that was something on their mind. Now remember, there are no statues of our God, because the Ten Commandments of God tell us that we aren't supposed to make statues of God the Father. So, every country around Israel wanted to own Israel. So the last time we read a little bit about somebody by the name of Antiochus Eupator. Isn't that a great name?
It's a weird name.
I know, Antiochus Eupator. Well, he appointed a chief officer by the name of Lysias to work out issues with other groups of people. And he appointed a man as governor who tried to make peace with Israel. Well, there were those who hated Israel, so they hated this governor named Ptolemy. And they made up false stories about him. And well, Betty, I hate to say this, but
He committed exile.
that's right. What did he do?
He committed
Yep.
to himself.
That's right. A new man was put in power, and he went after the Jews. Now, you know that Maccabeus was a religious man. So he and his soldiers put on sackcloth and ashes, and they asked God to forgive them for everything that they had done, and they begged God to help them. So, you know Lysias, who was in charge of the Antiochus Eupator's armies? Well, he kept going after Maccabeus. But after all that praying, the Maccabees kept winning. Lysias was no dummy, and he figured out that the reason he was losing was because, well, the Israelites had God on their side. Lysias figured that he'd better come up with a peace plan, even if he still hated the Jews. So Lysias wrote a letter to the Israelites, and King Antiochus wrote a letter to Lysias. Remember from the last chapter that these kings wanted all the Jews to act like they were Greeks. But that would mean giving up God as the real God. So King Antiochus figured out that allowing the Jews to keep worshiping and eating and dressing like they always had would be okay, as long as there was peace. Now, a lot of letters were then written, even to Rome, and every nation agreed to allow the Jews to keep on acting like Jews, as long as there would be peace. But you know how sinful people can be. And so not too long after these peace letters, some local enemies of the Jews started attacking them. One of the great battles was at a seaport by the name of Joppa, which, by the way, is really close to the modern city today called Tel Aviv. Jews Maccabeus was pretty upset that after everyone had agreed to have peace, these battles would take place. So he had to hurry up and get his armies back together, since many of them were back home taking care of their gardens. Well, there were some difficult battles, and one battle was so bad that the lake turned red from all the what?
E-L-O-O-D.
That's right. And that flowed in from the dead soldiers. But if the Jewish armies went somewhere where the Gentile people were being nice to the Jewish people who lived there, Judas Maccabeus would always thank them for their kindness. Now, you know that the Jewish people have many feast days, just like Christians do. And even we share a few of them, like Pentecost. When just after the Jewish armies had stopped fighting and defending themselves in order to celebrate Pentecost, another battle started. But the Jews had been preparing so much, preparing everything they could for Pentecost. They could feel God's protection, and they won. Now, everyone could see that religious Jews were there, and how religious they were. So Judas Maccabeus, just after battle, took up a collection, kind of like you see in a church today. Some people think that's a religious experience, except for those who are having to dig into their pockets, I guess. So many Jews were really happy that they could all get together, and in so doing, they thought that maybe the temple would once again be where they would be able to worship. Now, this Maccabeus was a very religious Jew, and he believed in the resurrection. Many Jews believed this, but they all knew that the Messiah could come someday and make it all happen. And here is what the book says. It says this, Betty. In doing this, taking up the collection, he, that's Judas Maccabeus, acted very well and honorably, taking account of the resurrection. For if we were not expecting that those who had fallen would rise again, it would have been unnecessary and foolish to pray for the dead. But he was looking to the splendid reward that is laid up for those who die loving the Lord, and that is good and a holy thought. He did like the Jews did back then, and he made an offering. The Jews have a feast day for that. It's called Yom Kippur. But they didn't know yet that one of their own, the only begotten Son of God, would come one day and offer himself once and for all the sins of the whole world. Too bad they wouldn't be alive to see that happen, I'm sorry to say. So they did the best they could with what they knew. And remember this, Betty, what I've told you before. Peace never seems to last very long in the Holy Land, even today. But remember also that I told you that some people will lie and cheat, even in religious groups. So a former high priest named Alchemist tried to get in good with King Demetrius, and he betrayed Judas Maccabeus by telling the king false stories. Well, that's all it took for more people who already disliked Judas to come forward and also to lie. So Nicanor was appointed to try to defeat Judas. Then the word got around that there was going to be a rebellion. So the religious Jews tore their clothes. What do? Tell everybody what they do. Yep, that's right. They tear their clothes, right? They put on sackcloth and ashes all over the place. In fact, it reminds us of what we Christians do on a very special day. What's that special day for us called? Ash Wednesday, which
is in a few days.
Just a few days from when I'm reading this right now, when all Christians, well, not everybody, there's only a few who won't, but all Christians go to church on Ash Wednesday so that they can get the cross of ashes on their forehead, right? And they can repent just like the Jews were doing. Well, the word got around that this was coming up. And the next thing you know, Nicanor tried to make peace because he heard about how successful Judas Maccabeus' army had been. Now that sounds like a good idea, but as soon as Alchemist heard about this arrangement, he was upset and he told leaders that Nicanor was disloyal. So King Demetrius demanded that Nicanor put Judas Maccabeus in prison in Antioch. Judas could tell that Nicanor was not being as nice as he had been, so Judas decided to hide out in the temple for a while. Well, that didn't go too well, so there was some fighting, and then Judas was off to Samaria. Since Judas Maccabeus figured out that Nicanor was scared of King Demetrius, and that Nicanor would rather kill his friend Judas than to be killed himself by the king, Judas gathered all of his troops together and gave them a big pep talk. And then he followed that up with many prayers as he looked up to heaven. Well, the big battle happened, and after many deaths, Judas saw Nicanor lying on the ground, dead. Yep. The soldiers then, what did they do?
Chop
Off Nicanor's head.
and parade around with it so everyone would know who everyone.
Yep. So the good news is that as we finish 2nd Maccabees, the Hebrews had their city and their temple back. The author of the book ends the book by saying that he hopes that everyone enjoyed his book and the stories in them. And that's what Betty and I want to say to all of you today. We hope that you have enjoyed all of the books, all of the stories, and everything that we have been able to share with you. Betty, I'm going to miss meeting with you. Do you think we ought to do another book another time? Maybe we have another book we can write.
Or maybe another is the kind of
Well, we were talking about maybe you reading some children's stories, weren't we? So it might be that we might think about doing that. But for now, we just want to say to everybody out there, thank you for these 2 years. And by the way, you're not going to believe how beautiful the cover of the book is. So this book is coming out really soon. And when you see it, well, I don't want to ruin the surprise. But you're going to see a few things that are really going to catch your eye. Betty, I love you. And I've loved being able to read with you and for you to ask the wonderful questions that you oftentimes ask when we're reading the book. Well, this is very sad in some ways, but let's say goodbye to all of our friends out there who have been following us for these last 2 years. Bye, everybody.